Some days, I think I need to record this podcast in the Shimmer, help it evolve and mutate into some superior show that will amaze the whole world. Then I remember I might have died the last time I was here, and now I don't know if I'm me, or just a copy of me, telling you to go to patreon.com/evacstation. I feel like if I were me, I'd tell you for less than the cost of the countless lives you sent into the Shimmer to find me, you could help support this podcast and keep brave souls like myself from such a cruel fate. Patreon.com/evacstation. It's just so familiar. I think I heard a bear mention it once. I'll just sit here being confused. You guys enjoy the show.
You hear the beating of your heart, you know the screaming's gonna start. Here comes the really scary part, 'cause it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night. It's terror time again. Oh, you just might die of fright. It's a terrifying time.
Once again, the clock has struck midnight, and you know what that means. It's terror time again, and we'll be running this podcast all through the night from a terrifying sight. The Shimmer, actually. And we are Aaron J. Waseska, and with me today, I've got, as always, Ryan Metters.
Yeah, hi.
And join us for a second time in this horror-themed series, Bo Ketchum is back.
Hey!
We couldn't get rid of him, folks. He followed us in here into the Shimmer. We couldn't get rid of him.
I'm into the Shimmer. Well, one in, one out.
Oh, yeah. We're about half in. It's fine. This week's episode is on Annihilation, the 2018 film, and we got some stuff to say about that. Before we get into that, though, let's get into this week's weird question. Guys, what is one genetic mutation you would like to have, and what is one you would not want to discover you have?
How explicit can we get?
Bo, it's not that kind of podcast. Come on.
All right.
I'm kidding. It's exactly that kind of podcast, guys.
I want to take the floor real quick here. As someone who's always had to wear glasses and had bad vision, I would love a genetic mutation where my vision is like superhuman levels of vision. That'd be so great. No glasses, no contacts, nothing. I could just see for days. See to the end. See to the fucking moon. It'd be great. I'd love it. As for what I wouldn't want to have, man, the list is endless here. Considering I've got bad sinuses already, and that's why I've got this cough going on these past few episodes, I'm going to say probably something to do with my breathing. If I had any breathing difficulties from a mutation, I would pretty much be like, yep, I'm done. Just kill me now.
God. Yeah. Ooh, alright, let me see. I think if I'm going to look at the stuff that I would not like to have, I definitely wouldn't want anything that affected my voice. That's a quintessential part of Ryan there, and if I lost that, I'd be real sad.
I agree 100%, Ryan.
So that's the bad one. The good one, I would say, damn. See, now, but whenever I hear genetic mutation, I instantly think X-Men, and then what kind of mutant would I want to be? And I'm
right. I'm saving that question for when we get to the X-Men next year.
I'm like, that's a question, but no, I'll hold it back. I would. In lieu of a genetic mutation, I would. Damn, I don't know. I honestly, I wouldn't want it personally, but I think it was really beautiful to have the flowers growing out of the person. I think, like, in terms of a genetic mutation just killing you and completely changing you into something not human, I think that was a really beautiful one. So I'm going to go with that. If I have to go out in genetic mutation style, I would rather become a flower version of myself.
I'm very impressed on your off-the-cuff answer. That was awesome.
I stole that straight from the movie. It's fine.
I'm gonna take the boring approach on genetic mutation and not get cancer.
Yeah,
That's fair.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
Or I'm really clumsy, so a third leg, hint, would be awesome. As far as genetic mutation,
That's a damn kickstand over there.
I'm clumsy, and I'd like to have a more stable base. To you know what I'm saying.
Would you really want that to be load bearing though? That's my question, because that seems like painful.
Doug, you know what I'm getting at. You know.
I know.
The one, yeah. That's I'm a roll with that.
Excellent. With all that, let's get into our movie here. So this week's movie is the twisted tale of horror that is the 2018's Annihilation, directed by Alex Garland and featuring Natalie Portman, Oscar Isaacs, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Gina Rodriguez, Tuva I can't pronounce this one, Novolny, and Tessa Thompson. The film went on to gross $32 million domestically, which is just short of the $40 million production budget. No numbers for overseas, of course, because this film was actually distributed via Netflix, so there's no numbers for that. It was nominated for a few awards, but it has not won anything yet. It's still 2018, so that could change by year's end. As a bonus fact, prior to release, the film drew criticism for casting Natalie Portman and Jennifer Jason Leigh as characters who are, in the books, described as Asian and half Native American, respectively. Garland explained that none of the 5 female characters' ethnicity is revealed in the first book, which is the only one in the trilogy he has read, and that the script is actually complete before the second book was ever published. The cast of the characters based on this his reaction only to the characters he met in the casting process, or the actors that he had worked with before. Because he wanted to take the story in his own direction, he did not read the other 2 books while making the film in order to not be influenced by them in any way.
I respect that.
It's a very interesting way of doing things. It's not the standard stuff we usually see.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of How Did This Get Made podcast, where they break down old crap movies. And I felt super excited about this podcast because I want to be the Jason Mantzoukas of my group.
Nice.
If you guys listen to that podcast, you get that reference. But all in all, like, I kept saying to myself, like, is this movie as shitty as I think it is? Because I kept saying to myself, I had this How Did This Get Made mentality where you're breaking it down from this aspect. And I'm like, this movie is really fucking crazy.
It does go a little in strange directions, and I got a synopsis here that's going to cover all that.
Well, do you want to do the initial thoughts before we get to the synopsis?
Yes. I have that. I have it out of order on my list here for some reason. So yeah, initial thoughts. What does everyone think going into this movie?
I would say one. I always love when a director of a movie doesn't do the research to it. That's it's just recipe for an enjoyable afternoon for me to talk about a shitty movie.
You must be. You must love that Last Airbender movie, then.
Oh man, I got excited when we talked about that earlier. But overall, I think it's a novel to. I don't know anything about the book, but based on some research, the book seems actually very good. Because I think visually it'd be easy to transcribe this book into like your mind's eye, so to speak. Where the translation to screen, I think, just was convoluted and just misguided. I think there's details about the world that they were in that we don't get with the movie that you would get in the book.
That's fair. Ryan, what do you think?
So I have 2 parts to my initial thoughts.
Okay.
First and foremost, I was really surprised when I heard that we were doing this movie in terror time, because to me, this is not a horror movie. To me, this is a science fiction piece. This is a really deep sci-fi movie. And I've seen it before, and when I saw it, it's one of those sci-fi pieces that really make you scratch your head, like Ex Machina. Like, it's a deep sci-fi piece. So, like when you're trying to look at it through the lens of a horror film, I think some things fail to hit the marks that you want them to hit. Like, there are like 3 or 4 spooky parts in the, like, scary parts in the movie, but 90% of the film is all like questioning these existential questions about, like, what does it mean to like want to, like, have, like, self-destruction inherent in humanity, and if you change yourself entirely, does that mean the person you were was destroyed, or is it just changed into something new? It gets deep, but suffice it to say, as a horror movie, I don't think it's that great. As a sci-fi film, I really like it.
And that's fair. I think the thing is that sci-fi and horror do kind of share a wall, so to speak, so they kind of overlap in ways that aren't necessarily super obvious. Like, I think this has a lot of unsettling moments in it, but I could see where you're coming from. I don't think it's straight up legit horror. I think it's maybe in the same camp as maybe the second Aliens movie, where it's not scary, but it's definitely got the sci-fi stuff going on. And maybe Aliens is the wrong example, but in that same ballpark.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's I'm making notes and I just send them to Aaron.
Gotcha.
So if you get a random text, that's just what happened. So yeah, I can't wait to discuss this movie based on Ryan's initial thoughts.
And as for me, I think the movie was really trippy, but I do kind of like most of what I'm seeing here. So, with that, I got a synopsis for you boys. You guys ready?
Let's get it.
Do it.
Let's see.
Ryan, is your drink? You drinks away, right, buddy?
Hold on. One sip.
One sip.
All right, let's do it.
The following is told to the audience by our protagonist, Padme, as she talks in an interrogation intermixed with various flashbacks. After a year of being presumed MIA, Poe Dameron returns home to Padme's loving embrace. But he must have drank something in the water down in Mexico on the way home because he's deathly ill and needs help. They get abducted by the menacing government agency and taken to Sector Z, a base camp set not far outside of a chaotic little subspace we like to call the Shimmer. Poe had apparently been on a top-secret suicide mission with the team in the Shimmer for about a year. Coincidence? I think not. Padme is told nothing, as usual, until she agrees to join another suicide mission into the Shimmer. The menacing government agency agrees, believing her training as a soldier and a scientist will be of some use. Her team are a multiracial bunch of women with unique psychological damages that will in no way impede their ability to proceed into the upcoming journey.
Of course not.
Shortly entering the Shimmer, we skip forward an unknown amount of time. Our team encounters the various creatures of the Shimmer, and they soon learn that life finds a way.
God damn it, I knew it was coming, I just didn't know it was coming.
Inside, they find sharktigators, wendibears, and probably a cat dog or two. They even find a... what did I write here? Oh, a tape, sorry. They even find a tape from the former team showing strange mutations they encountered before they died. Afraid to press on, the team is reluctant, but Dr. Ventress, the leader, is insistent on continuing. They decide to keep going forward to the coast, as it's probably closer than going back to the base camp at this point. The girls are picked off one by one, turn on one another, and eventually find their way to the lighthouse at the center of the Shimmer. Along the way, they deduce that things aren't simply mutating, but the Shimmer acts like a prism, scrambling and refracting in from everything inside, from radio signals to DNA. Padme arrives at the lighthouse, only to find the final tape from Poe Dameron himself, showing he had killed himself, and a suspicious-looking duplicate was left standing over his charred remains. She then finds Dr. Ventress in the basement, and she dies, becoming a CGI thingamabob, and then sucks off a drop of blood from Padme's face. The CGI doodad then transforms into a gimp suit-wearing creature that mimics Padme's movements and eventually forms her. Padme tricks this creature into immolating itself like Poe did in the video, and she escapes the Shimmer, eventually, leaving her here to tell her story to the menacing government agency. But, to the audience, who's to say she's telling the truth? This Padme then visits what we believe to be the fake Poe, who is now feeling much better. She says she knows that he's not really Poe, and then he asks if it's really Padme. They embrace, the colors of their eyes shimmer, And the credits roll. What do you guys think of this movie?
Weird, man. It's fucking weird.
Right. I could totally geek out on this and explain, and I'd totally be plagiarizing the YouTube videos that I watched on this because I had to like figure this shit out. But it's pretty. It's a thick ass movie. And I have all questions answered for you guys. Trust me.
Well, like I said beforehand, I did enjoy this movie. I watched it originally with a friend of mine who's also really into sci-fi, and it's one of those movies where you watch it, you're quiet for like 5 minutes as you're digesting it, and then you have like an hour-long discussion on the crazy ass shit that you were seeing in the film. So.
Sure.
To that extent, I really enjoyed it. Like, it's a head scratcher. It definitely makes you think.
And so that's kind of like where I wanted to debate this. Like, we're talking about a horror movie. Like, from a science fiction aspect of it, like, very good movie, possibly. Like, it's very psychological. There's a lot of referencing to, there's the chemical, or like not chemical, but cellular, like as far as like cells reproducing and being mutated and being a cancer, so to speak. It has a lot of very thick layers to it, but that's what makes a great science fiction movie, not a horror movie.
So then I guess the first question we have is for you, Aaron.
Oh, boy.
Why do you consider this to be a horror movie candidate? Like, what makes this horror to you?
Yeah,
well,
Aaron, give us some answers.
Wow, I get us questions today. That's weird.
What's up, man?
Well,
For
starters, I'll say that the movie was tagged horror, along with all the other movies on my list, so that's the main reason why it was at least looked at. As for why I picked it, though, from what I'm told, it had a lot of like this surreal, like otherworldly stuff going on, and for me, horror is a very wide spectrum of flavors. You have your gory horror we've talked about, you have your psychological horror, and then you have stuff like this where it's kind of like in the same vein as I may have misspoke earlier with Aliens, but it's kind of the same vein as say Cthulhu level horror, where it's not so much that you're dealing with this big monster, but you're dealing with this otherworldly stuff that you just can't understand. And the fear and the horror comes from that lack of understanding, which is the kind of horror I really want to get into more of. I mean, I bought the anthology of H.P. Lovecraft stories recently to kind of get my fix of that. And I think this kind of fits in that realm. Kind of like The Mist almost, but not quite like...
Sure.
It misses some of the tropes of a horror film, to be sure, but it definitely goes for the otherworldly feel that some really good horror movies do hit on pretty hard.
I agree with the otherworldly aspect of the movie. I guess what really kind of makes it stand out for me is not horror, is that the majority of the movie, I don't necessarily feel a sense of dread accompanied with that otherworldly feeling. Like, it's definitely something extraterrestrial, something like crazy and like inherently different than anything we had, but it doesn't reach that eldritch level of otherness that makes you just mortally terrified for what the fuck is going on. Rather, it feels like there's a sense of both discovery in what the fuck the Shimmer is and forced self-reflection as they're like coming to grips with who they are as a person in the midst of it. That ends up having an impact on how they interact with the Shimmer, because a lot of the changes that happen to them are actually kind of psychologically induced towards the end of the film. We can talk about that a little later, but yeah.
And
very psychological in that aspect.
Oh, and I was going to say, too, if you want to take that a step further, the self-reflections and psychological aspect kind of borrows elements from the video games, not the movie, of Silent Hill, especially Silent Hill 2, where the manifestations of the world around you are a representative of your psychological problems, basically. I know this movie is not doing that exactly, but it does hint on some of those psychological problems there, and kind of lets them unfold in a way. And it definitely has the right flavors to stuff like Silent Hill and to stuff like Cthulhu. But I feel like you guys aren't wrong. It's definitely not completely there. It's definitely in the footsteps, but not all the way down the path.
Well, there's just a lack of chemistry, I think, from the acting. So, from the book, no one had names. They were described. So one was they were called the biologist, the psychologist, etc. And I never felt that kind of group setting, but they all had their own sort of self-destructive behavior that they kind of brought to the Shimmer, which was ultimately going to be what causes their demise.
Right, because and I think it was really put very well in the movie when she's in the midst of one of these interrogation scenes, when the guy asks her to explain herself for why she's the only one who lived, and she said, at the end of the day, I had a reason to come back, and I don't think that they did. And that was real. That was real. She explicitly said that, and I was like, yep, all right.
And I kind of wanted to reevaluate the movie. One girl was a cutter. I think one girl was an addict, right? Mm-hmm. Was Natalie Portman an adulteress? And then that was her self-destructive behavive.
They all kind of have they all have a Seven Sin vibe to them a little bit.
Yeah, there's this book called it kept reminding me of the book Choke that Chuck Palahniuk wrote, and they're all writers who go to this one particular house, but they're all kind of randomly chosen to be on this bus. And all of them have this very unique story, but they all kind of have this vibe to them, and they all kind of die off too. It's a very interesting book. So it kind of had that theme of are these women? That's where my takeout was are these women connected in some sort of way? And that's where I kind of got disappointed towards the end, where they just kind of died off, where I never got that chemistry of camaraderie between them.
Well, especially the one girl who just kind of walked off and disappeared.
Right, were they kind of side characters to a Star Trek show, and they died off, and it was Jennifer Jason Leigh and Natalie Portman. And I didn't get the whole Jennifer Jason Leigh death. Did she leave the Shimmer the same way Natalie Portman left the Shimmer?
No, I think she became part of the Shimmer.
She died. No, so what I got from Jennifer Jason Leigh's demise, especially because she herself had cancer, and she knew she wasn't going to make it back out. Really, she went out there because she just had to know. At the end of the day, she just needed to know after having studied it for all these years.
She was Bruce Willis from Armageddon.
Right. My guess, though, I wouldn't go so far as to say it was self-sacrificial, because she wasn't giving herself to get knowledge back out. She just wanted to know for herself before she died. That's what I think.
I gotcha.
But my
selfish
read from
human.
Her death, definitely. My read from her death, however, is that first of all, the thing that we see die isn't her, but rather it's the doppelganger. And second, I think her doppelganger dies so quickly because it forms a replica of her who had cancer, and so was automatically kind of doomed to be short-lived from the go. So in that near final scene, when Natalie Portman is walking into the chamber that she's waiting in, if you look really closely, during the first moments before she actually turns to face Natalie Portman, her face is still being constructed. She doesn't have eyes.
Yeah,
I must have missed that, actually.
You gotta pay close attention to
Oh, yeah, this movie, that's what, I watched it last night and tonight, and it was so thick. It's usually I'll go back and watch a movie enough times to get these subtleties, but I had to kind of cheat a little bit and hit YouTube. But that's one thing I was curious about, because she's underdeveloped. So was she part of was that the last phase of this metal reconstruction of the alien, so to speak?
That's my guess. That was my read on it. But especially because after she dies and vomits up all of this light, it essentially becomes the thing that we're led to believe is what crashed into.
Oh no, I totally get it. So
yeah.
She's tainted and she explodes instead of turning into the robot that ultimately the robot turns, or it takes the blood and then it evolves into this robot from Natalie Portman. Because she's not tainted by cancer, it manifests itself all the way.
Well, what I'm guessing is the doppelgangers are meant to be short-lived because it's constantly changing, and when the doppelganger is made of Kane, who we're led to believe, who according to us is perfectly healthy. Even when a doppelganger of a perfectly healthy human is formed, eventually that body starts to die because of the constant change going on.
Right.
So when the doppelganger is formed of Ventress, who's already got cancer, that doppelganger is already going to be really, really, really short-lived.
And so you see the ultimate evolve process right then and there. Right. Where Kane, it took him a little bit to get back and do that short-lived.
Right. And it lends itself to believe that because Kane's sickness, Kane's body only stabilizes when the thing in the shimmer is dead and it stops changing. That's what that's what I think caused his body to stabilize.
Is it his body stabilizing, or is that a doppelganger? Because
it's absolutely a doppelganger. No, Kane is absolutely a doppelganger at the end.
But because the shimmer's gone, why is that evolutionary process kind of stop? Or are we led to believe that it stops at that point?
I think we are. I think we're led to believe that. I know we've gone entirely off the rails, Aaron. I'm sorry, but
oh my god,
no, this is fascinating. I love hearing this guy.
This is how deep this movie is, because there's even another theory that the shimmer essentially is dead, but the shimmer's gone, but is the evolutionary process advanced so much that it can be dead, and now these two characters are going to evolve, and it's going to keep on going. One of the things I looked up was there's a Crosby, Stills, and Nash song that's played at a certain point where it actually talks about one being two of lovers, and then those two lovers become four.
Yeah.
At that moment of the doppelgangers, so to speak, the evolutionary process of these two people looking at each other. So are we led to believe that when the movie cuts that just continues in a more advanced state? It's so advanced that it doesn't need the shimmer anymore because it's passed on that many times. So then you see another scene of them making love. So then that's also that child being created that essentially has that evolutionary process of the shimmer.
Yeah, there's a lot in this movie. There's a lot in this movie.
And that's what I think about the book. I think the book probably was very good, but
so I've actually heard criticism about the book being very sterile, for lack of a better term. The fact that there are no explicit names, that they're all named by their role as opposed to actual names and actual characterization. I think it lends itself to kind of the overall feeling from the book, it's why I'm not mad at the director for reading the first one and saying, okay, I have an idea of what I want to do with the bare bones of this story and with the kind of story that I want to tell from it, and from that he extrapolated a really good sci-fi piece in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah, sci-fi, it's good.
Well, and
Or
speaking
not.
of the book and the differences, there's one that I found very interesting, and it's that. So you guys remember in the movie that after a particular flashback, they switch back to the current storyline where they're just in the Shimmer and they've been in there for a few days and they have no idea where they're at. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So in the film, we find out that their minds are presumed scrambled by the prism-like nature of the Shimmer. In the book, it suggested that Ventress may have actually mentally manipulated the rest of the team in order to ease their transition into the Shimmer, which is why they forget those days instead of remembering them. And my question to you guys is, which of those scenarios fits the story better, you think?
I'm stuck on how Ventress would have manipulated them into forgetting the first couple of days. Are you is it suggested that the first couple of days were so horrific that Ventress wanted to kind of reset the clock so that way they wouldn't be so freaked out in the beginning of the journey?
I'm thinking...
No, I think what it is, there was no manipulation. I think her confidence, because there's never been anyone to come back at this point, at least to what's her name, Vera's knowledge. So
Right.
No one's come back. There's never been a comm line that's ever come back. So she has no point of reference. So she would not know that you would have to go through this process. So her point of view, you might go through the Shimmer and you just lose radio contact. So she has no idea that there needs to be a manipulation of the brain before going into here to ease that transition. I think that's just the Shimmer fucking with you. You walk into your eyes have to adjust when you walk into a bright room, and essentially you're walking into a prism, so it's that just shock of light adjustment, and then immediately you start mutating. And so I just think that initial process of your body being mutated kind of goes into shock and takes a little bit.
I think it's more likely that as well. Yeah,
That's
I agree
fair.
with that.
It was just a very interesting note I saw in the book comparisons I wanted to see what you guys thought on.
It is kind of interesting.
Also in the film, you notice one thing on what's her name again? The main character's arm.
The tattoo.
Yeah, well, it starts off as a bruise, but by the end of the film, you notice there's an Ouroboros tattoo on her, like making the infinity symbol. So my question to you guys is, what does that what could that possibly mean?
Before I lose this thought, I want to say this. Could it possibly be? So, the bruise starts off as an evolutionary mutation. When the Shimmer ends, is at the stop of the mutation. So instead of her turning into a snake person, like mutated process, does the tattoo just remain as a show of stop of the Shimmer being there?
Nah, guys, you missed it. You ready for it?
Oh, here we go.
That tattoo is actually on the drug addict's arm.
Yeah, it shows up everywhere.
It transfers. It's a part of the DNA that transfers from the addict to Natalie Portman's character. It's supposed to be a physical representation of just how much her DNA itself is changing. So that tattoo is it actually belongs to the addict, and over the course of their time in the Shimmer, it was actually just transferred to her.
Oh, yeah, I wonder.
So I may have missed it then, Ryan. Do we see the tattoo disappearing from the addict's arm during the movie, or is it just not there when it suddenly is on her arm?
You see it in you're talking about the dead person, and it's kind of obscured with sand on it.
No, that'd be the one who's eaten by the bear.
Yeah, right, so the one who's eaten by the bear. She you never see her. Right, she has that tattoo on her arm, and you see that on her arm before they go into the Shimmer. Now, while they're in the Shimmer, she always has her sleeves on, so you never see
Okay,
it.
that might be why I didn't notice it then.
Right, but you notice the bruise on Natalie Portman's arm, and then when you flash back to the interrogation scene, you see it fully formed on her arm. That's where it comes from.
And then, that makes sense, because then the lady who turned into a tree, she looks at the same spot, and her evolutionary transfer is like the trees coming out.
Right.
And then she ultimately, I guess then she would have never had the tattoo, so that doesn't make any sense. Well, yeah, there's a lot of elements to that tattoo, though, too. The symbolism of forever and also self-destruction. What's different about the infinity symbol on that is that it's not flowless. It's actually a snake eating itself, showing there's a self-destruction element, evolutionary path, but ultimately it goes on forever.
Yeah, I think this movie plays a lot with the ideas of not only the ideas of like how like, okay, so it starts off with the concept of cells, like the natural life cycle and end of a cell is actually just like a fault of like a fault in their genes, and how like if they could figure out how to fix that, then everybody essentially would never have to die. But they extrapolate that into this concept of how it's in human nature to self-destruct and like naturally like seek the end of things, the end of like stability and the end of stable things in their lives. But the movie then goes on to explore the idea of radical change in like juxtaposed with the idea of destruction. So it's like when you destroy something, are you actually destroying it, or is it just becoming something so fundamentally different, in which case it doesn't end, but it radically changes to the point where what you were before is dead, and what you are now is so far removed from that point. Is it considered just a change, or is it considered the destruction of what came before? Which is why the last question is really poignant in the movie, when he asks her if she's actually Lena, and she spent so much time in the Shimmer, and so many things about her DNA has changed, she genuinely doesn't know if she is still Lena, if she is still human.
And that's assuming she even told the truth about who she was to the interrogator. She could even be the copy, like, gimp suit character we saw earlier, too.
I'm pretty sure that she herself is that she like the Lena that came back is the Lena that actually went into the Shimmer.
Yeah, there's right
because when you see the doppelganger actually go back in and set fire to everything, if it was actually Lena, if that was actually Lena, she wouldn't have reverted back to the fucking gimp suit robot version that was just lit aflame in phosphorus. There's no way that human Lena would have taken on that form.
Well, no. I agree with you that is not what happened. But who's to say that Lena telling this whole story is telling the truth? If it's the fake Lena, she could just make all this up to be like, oh yeah, no, I totally got out of there. I'm totally Lena. It's fine.
No, it's a good point, because like at this point we never see both of them, Lena never has that complete like metaphoric process. Like it's almost like she figured out real quick. She saw the video of the robot killing the original, so to speak, and then and I think she had this quick-witted moment of like, oh shit, hold up. Let me kill this thing before it comes completely evolved. Because I just saw what it did to the other lady, and it turned into a big old weird cloud. So let me knock her off now, essentially sending this original evolving. Because like, the more time you spend in the in the Shimmer, the longer you spend in here, the more you're evolving. So is the original Natalie Portman is just an evolved state of her experience in the Shimmer, and now because she figured out a way to end it, she's out on the other side with Kane, the other guy. So when the Shimmer leaves, and he'll essentially he has to be the doppelganger, right? But then you have that connection, and they both have the purple eyes. But then that cell, she scans her blood very early on to just like see how she's doing, and she has that purple like tone to her cells, which shows her she's evolving. So I don't know, that connection for me was kind of weird because like it's a little too ambiguous for me.
I'll say as much. I think that if that's actually Lena and she's just like evolved, that has more meaning to the film and would have offer a lot more depth to what the story's trying to tell. But
agree.
But I am also a huge fan of the unreliable narrator, and I really do have suspicions as to whether or not that the Gimp suit monster is actually her, or lied and escaped and is trying to take over now.
I think it tells a better story that it is actually Lena that made it out. But what I think and why I really believe that to be the case is because when you've been telling this story about metamorphosis and about change, you see that like if it's actually Lena, like Lena A, who went into the Shimmer and came out at the end, if that's actually Lena A, and she's talking to Kane, who we know, like, it's 95% the doppelganger, you realize that the only, like, discernible difference that they have between the two of them are the shimmering eyes. In which case, the person who was human and came out of the other side of the Shimmer is essentially as changed as the doppelganger who started out as a doppelganger and has taken human form. At the end of the movie, there's no real discernible difference between the two. And like neither of them is human and neither of them is alien at that point. Now there's something entirely different. And the Kane and the Lena that was started at the beginning of the movie, they're both dead. And what's left is something entirely new.
So what you're saying is, without like complete dissection, we're talking about a third version of Kane and Lena. Is that what you're trying to say?
Kind of, like not necessarily. I think Lena was like originated as human and has been changed by the Shimmer. I think Kane is like the Kane that we end up with has originated as the doppelganger and was in the process of becoming human. Like it was the doppelganger process, like it processing itself, trying to become human because it was it interacted with Kane. And at the end of the movie, they're both kind of at the same point in that spectrum where they're in between the two.
No, I think we're on the same page. It's just this more advanced, continued evolutionary process of these cells constantly evolving into something different.
Mm-hmm.
I like how there's a lot of different ways to read this, though. Like, you could definitely come at this in any different angle and not really be wrong, but there's just so many different conflicting things that support different theories. It's just ridiculous how deep this gets.
Yeah, and that's what's enjoyable about talking to you guys about this, because a lot, like, you can talk about religion with somebody, and you can debate these topics till you're blue in the face, and no one will, you'll never come to a consensus. And this movie is very similar to where, if you're not talking with educated people about, movies and whatnot, you would just talk yourself into a circle about, oh, this is the worst horror movie in the world. It's the greatest science fiction in the world. And ultimately it's a heavy, deep movie. And I just think at the end of the day, the end result was just a very complicated psychological story that didn't necessarily get transcribed very well.
Yeah, there's some errors in translation, I think, that could have been patched in a bit better.
They packed a lot into it, and I love reading stories like this. I like having these troubled characters that come together. Even the description in the book, they don't have names like we talked about earlier. I kind of like that because it lets your imagination go off. When Natalie Portman's character talks about the mutation of these trees, I would love to read that section because I want to know what my brain would think of. Even though visually they did a very good job of making a pretty visual movie, when you kind of have these individual stories, it's a lot of dead air time too. And I didn't know if the visual impact was as much, didn't provide that level of balance of entertainment to kind of keep it fluid. So it got a little bit stagnant, at times. And I think when you're doing a movie this thick and psychological, you really got to keep that tension going. And I don't know, I didn't like it. I don't know if I didn't like it. I don't know.
Well, I got 2 questions left here. I'm going to try to keep them quick. First one, so going to the more horrific scene in the movie, that fucking Wendigo bear, guys. What do you guys think of that whole scene?
Awesome.
Rough.
Awesome. I thought it was a great depiction of, and this is where it would have been cool to add this element of horror. Like the alligator was dope. This bear was even doper. Like,
I would have loved way more creatures, yeah.
Right. Like that was cool. And I liked that. It was neat.
But go ahead.
I enjoyed it. I really did. But I was okay with there only being 2, honestly, because for me, it wasn't necessarily about the creatures, but more about what the creatures represented.
No, I know.
and how like various things like within the Shimmer like were being placed in things that it absolutely should not have been in. Like the fact that the bear was screaming with the girl's voice fucked me up. It was real bad. It was cool. Amazingly well done, but it was real bad.
But I agree.
Just like that's the one bit of like existential eldritch horror that I was like, yep, okay, no, that's horrifying. No, that's really terrifying.
I agree with you. I definitely think that the movie isn't about that, and I definitely think that putting more of that would have been detracted from it. But I just like creature features, and I would love to have seen an alternate reality where that ended up being the focus and see where that takes us, because that would have been interesting to see too, I think.
And to be on the favor side of Ryan's opinion about the movie, like I think what he's getting at is like it wasn't necessarily, it's a science fiction sort of horror. So adding those other monster elements, are you getting away from that deep psychological science fiction-y sort of
you would definitely
about the Shimmer, or what? Because I was expecting a little bit more of this like mutated monster sort of cheese movie, and so I think going into it I was a little bit off taken by it. Took a kind of a different approach to the movie than I thought.
Yeah.
And then the last one here, concerning this book came from a series of books, or concerning this movie was based on a series of books, do you expect more films to come, or is that low, or the low grossing's going to hold that back, you think?
Oh, yeah, it's all about money. And if it didn't produce, they'll find there's plenty of books out there to turn into movies that have a possible money-making aspect,
Absolutely. If anyone in Hollywood's looking for a book, I have one right here you could probably take.
Are you talking about your own book?
Yeah.
Pretty damn good. It's pretty damn good.
Really?
It's pretty damn good.
I'd read it.
I've done some tweaks since you checked it out, Ryan, but I definitely think it's gotten better.
Awesome.
That's
what
like,
was... Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
All right. Well, to extrapolate on the point, like, yeah, I don't think there's any interest from like producers to make it because it didn't make that much money. But to be frank, I don't think the director is interested in making a sequel.
It doesn't sound like
it. I think because he took such a loose adaptation of the book, and because he didn't pay attention, he didn't put in work to set up the world around this story. It's just somewhere, probably in America, something weird crashed into a lighthouse, and fucking a shimmery field is happening around it. Go. I think because he didn't take the time to set up the rest of the world and how this might affect and give us more things to explore within that world, it shows that he was really invested in telling this story and not the story of, okay, so these two people that are not quite human made it out of the shimmer. How does it affect the world around it? I don't think he's interested in telling that story at all. I think he wanted to tell this movie, and that was it.
So do you think a trilogy setup would, if he was a little bit more invested in reading the entire series as opposed to just the one, could you have seen a better storyline breakdown, given more time to develop these characters instead of just trying to force it all into one movie?
I don't, because it does. This movie doesn't feel like he tried to do the work of 3 books in one movie. It feels like he took the core bits of one book and then kind of
made his own story.
He streamlined it into his own story. And I have no doubt that the actual trilogy that it's based on goes beyond okay, well, these guys get out of the shimmer, and because they're mutated, things happen, and It might talk about their kids, and it might talk about how the mutation actually spreads and how they start picking up DNA traits from anybody else. I think that's a different story than what he was going for.
And that would make sense why he kind of rushed. I appreciate ambiguous endings to movies, but this one just felt forced and not thought out. And so I'm thinking that maybe a TV show, maybe this storyline would have been really good over over a 10 episode kind of a Lost in Space sort of extension, get 8 hours out of a 3-book series opposed to just 2. Maybe this would have been a completely different movie.
I don't know. The thing about it is, I don't feel like it was rushed per se. I feel like I enjoyed the story that this told. I don't think it's a horror story, but I enjoy the story that this set out to tell, and I think by removing unnecessary aspects from the rest of from the books and from the source material, I think he told a really good one. And I feel like the ending is intentionally ambiguous. It's definitely designed to not just give you the answer, but rather make you sit and spin on it for a while. But I enjoy that. I enjoy the movies that kind of make you go deep into thought about it. And I think this went after, I think this hit the marks it was trying to hit very well.
I gotcha. I guess my only takeaway, because I get distracted very easy, is that you like movies that you want to sit and spin on.
Thanks, Bob. Glad you paid attention.
That was so great. No, that was a great analogy, and you summed that up very well. That was awesome.
Well, if you guys
definitely see where it comes from.
If you guys like ambiguous endings, you're gonna love my trivia here in a little bit. Before we get to that, though,
not again.
Before we get to that,
the last group of questions were pretty fun.
Oh yeah. Before we get to that, though, mailbag. If you want to reach out to us on Tumblr, Twitter, or Facebook to leave comments about your favorite movies or talk to us in general about anything you want to talk about, those are the best places to hit us up at. Also, we have an email. Ryan, what's that email?
That is evacstation@gmail.com.
That's right. You can also email us there or go to our Patreon page. I probably should push that a little bit too. You can comment there. You can keep up with us and see the videos we put out even earlier than you would on YouTube or anywhere else. So be sure to check all that out. With that in mind, let's get to our trivia segment. It's a little different this time because I didn't want to have you guys do the same little game twice. I have named the movie with that ambiguous ending.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna
This should be fun.
I'm gonna give you a brief description of the ambiguous ending, and you've got to tell me what movie you think it is.
Oh, no way.
I've got 5 options here. Let's see who gets the most points. Are you guys ready?
Alright, let's get it.
Alright. First one. We have a kid standing in a corner, and our protagonist is killed by something behind her.
That's
Say it
Blair
again.
Witch.
Oh,
That's Blair Witch.
Ryan gets the point. Blair Witch it
Oh,
is.
man.
Next one I got here. It just keeps spinning, and it doesn't stop before the credits roll.
Dude, Inception.
That's 2 for Ryan.
Jesus. Oh my
I know
God.
these, alright?
Alright, let's see if I can get this one. We're left on a bus to contemplate the actions that were just taken and the road ahead for our characters.
Speed. With Keanu Reeves.
No,
It is
that's
not
how
Speed.
I don't know what it said.
Just say it
I
one more
cannot.
Yep.
I can't think. Say it again.
We were left on a bus to contemplate the actions just taken and the road ahead for our characters.
Is that The Mist?
Nope.
Is that Heart and Soul? With
Oh, nope.
Robert Downey Jr.?
Nope, you guys are way off the mark.
Well, I'm not
Yeah, I don't know
awesome
this.
like Brian is.
I'm not that awesome. I don't know this one.
You guys want to give up on this one?
Sure. You already got a hint?
I'm trying to think of a hint I could give. A wedding just happened.
Wedding Crashers? Oh, God. I sound like an idiot.
You're gonna kick yourself when I tell you what it is.
Alright, what is
Best
it?
Friend's Wedding.
The Graduate.
Oh.
I've actually never seen it.
I've seen a lot of
No.
parodies of it.
I've watched it, but I usually masturbate halfway through, and then at
Oh,
that point,
God.
I'm done watching it, so I
Alright,
never really see the ending.
here's another one that might be a bit tricky. After a series of events in Japan, our protagonist leaves, whispering to his love interest something the audience can't hear, but their faces say it
Godzilla.
all. Nope.
Shit, say it one more time, just
Yep.
so I can hear it.
After a series of events in Japan, our protagonist leaves, whispering to his love interest something the audience can't actually hear, but their faces say it all.
Karate Kid 2.
Nope.
Damn.
I call it Bo's just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks.
I'm just thinking of any movie with Japanese people in it. And I watch a lot of Kung Fu movies, so it's really hard.
What their faces see.
I will give you a hint. The love interest is played by Scarlett Johansson.
Ghost in the Shell.
Nope.
Last
Damn it.
Transaction.
What was that?
Lost in Translation.
Lost in Translation. Oh,
I got it.
Oh, man.
I'm going to give Bo half a point for that because I think he kind of helped.
Yeah. I get too excited and words don't come out good. So
I know what he was trying to say. Brian gets the point. Bo, I'll give you a point for that too because I know you're trying to get it out.
I love your pity point, and I appreciate that, sir.
All right, last one for all the marbles. Not knowing if the aliens survived, the final line uttered by one of the survivors as the screen fades to black is, "Why don't we just wait here a while and see what happens?"
Independence Day?
Nope, that's a good guess though. The clue would have definitely hinted towards that. but-
War of the Worlds with
Nope.
Tom Cruise.
Nope. I'll give you a hint. There's only one alien that appears in this entire film. And
Alien.
nope, it's not the xenomorph.
Damn it.
Not Predator?
Nope.
What year?
Let me look it up real quick. I know it's an old one.
You said Alien already, right?
Yes, that has been taken out. This is 1982.
Oh man, I'm done. I don't know.
It is considered to be one of the many horror classics.
The Thing?
Ding, ding, ding. Ryan gets the
Yay!
Oh my god.
I've never seen it!
point. It's such a
You-
good movie. You need to see it.
Kicked my ass. Actually, I worked at a movie theater. 50 Cent on Tuesdays were a second run, 2-screen, second oldest theater in town. And that's a game we'd play is like we'd name 2 actors and give the most like vague description of a movie. And that's how we'd like spend our time in between movie rushes. So I'm really disappointed in myself for getting so unbelievably smoked by you, Ryan. I appreciate you, God of ambiguous description of movies.
I love that
I
there's...
like those movies where I have to sit and spin, you know?
Yes! You called back.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that little segment, and we're going to finish up with the ranking of the film, as we've been doing with our horror movies this season. Bucket or fuck it. Do we like the movie, or do we not like it? Gentlemen, Annihilation. Are we going to bucket this movie, or fuck it this movie?
I have so many analogies I can make, but I find the love in most things, which requires me to want to fuck this movie in a good way. But I'm going to put it in the bucket at the end of the day, but just on the rim. It's barely there. Because I think there's more to this movie than the horror aspect. And so it's on the rim. It's on the rim. It's not in there, but if we're doing a sci-fi podcast, then I'm tipping it in there. But it's a horror one, so it's not quite in.
So just a tip for you. Just a tip.
It's just the tip, buddy.
Yeah, because we're ranking this based in comparison to other horror movies, I'm actually gonna say fuck it.
Ooh.
I really like this movie, and I think it's a wonderful sci-fi movie. I don't think it's a very good horror film, so I'm gonna say fuck it.
I will complete the spectrum and say I'll go full bucket. I enjoyed it.
Full bucket.
I
Bucket.
do think there are issues with it, but I think a lot of them are just kind of one of those, like, it's just a very vague and ambiguous movie for the purpose of being vague and ambiguous in its, like, presentation. So, I like what we get, and I definitely want to go back to it at some point, but I'm going to give it some time before I do that. So, yeah, good stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter. Go to our email, evacstation at gmail.com, to give us any questions, feedbacks, concerns, or if you just want to go ahead and recommend us movies, you can do that on Patreon. You can join us for $1 to subscribe to stuff early. You can also go ahead and reach out to us there and offer us any kind of suggestions for movies you want to see us talk about. And we'll even have exclusive podcasts. Earlier this month, in October, you guys could actually listen to our James Gunn podcast, where we talk about the whole social media controversy of James Gunn. So be sure to check that out when it comes out, if it's not out already. Ryan, is there anything else I'm forgetting?
No, I think you hit everything.
All right. Actually, I do need to tell you guys that next week you all will be listening to, and Ryan, we're gonna talk about this next week, Hereditary.
Oh no.
I've mixed.
Heard, I haven't seen it at all, but I've heard things.
I've got mixed feelings about it. I cannot wait to discuss it with you.
Oh boy.
So until then, Bo, I want to thank you for joining us in this podcast. It's been a hell of a time having you here with us.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Oh man, guys, this is so enjoyable. I thought both podcasts tonight we covered a lot of good stuff. Even this movie, I am so surprised we were able to. I was worried that it was not going to be as long as it was, and I'm glad we were able to get some good content. Side note, one thing I did not mention is every time they call it the Shimmer, I couldn't help but to think of of course, the Simpsons episode of The Shinning, unless you want to get sued reference. So I always had a little giggle moment every time that they said The Shimmer. But thanks again. Call me anytime. I would love to be a part of any other projects you have. I want to bump my status up as guest star to featured star. So let's get this going.
Oh, well, we'll definitely have you on again before too long. We have a whole bunch of fun stuff in 2019 that we definitely want to have you around for.
Awesome. Well, good talking to you guys. If you ever want to do a special live episode together and actually record something together, you can always try to plan a special road trip. And I think that would be pretty enjoyable to do this more in person. And I think it'd be a lot more colorful. Just saying so.
That'd be very interesting. We'll have to figure something out for that.
Yeah, we'll think of something special, some big release or something, and do a little extra. Give the listeners out there a little bit more.
Absolutely. For everyone who's still listening, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you after the credits.
And the monsters run
Bum, 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 bum.
rotting faces full of slime. Don't you know it's terror time?